And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. During a commencement speech on Thursday, President Obama defended his foreign policy, including target assassinations and drone warfare. Obama made the remarks at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs.
As Commander-in-Chief, I have not hesitated to use force unilaterally where necessary to protect the American people. Thanks to our military, intelligence, and counterterrorism professionals, bin Laden is gone. Anwar al-Awlaki, a leader of the al-Qaeda affiliate in Yemen, is gone. Ahmed Abdi Godani, the al-Qaeda leader in Somalia, he's gone. Ahmed Abu Khattala, accused in the attacks in Benghazi, captured. Mohammed Mansour, the leader of the Taliban, gone. Leader after leader in ISIL. Haji Mutaz, their number 2. Mohammed Emwazi, who brutally murdered Americans. Abu Nabil, the ISIL leader in Libya, all gone. Abu Dawood, a leader of their chemical weapons program, captured. The list goes on, because if you target Americans, we will find you, and justice will be done, and we will defend our nation.
That was President Obama delivering the commencement speech at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs on Thursday. With only a small number of U.S. Special Forces on the ground, Iraq and Syria have become new fronts in the global drone war that has launched thousands of strikes in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Somalia. The exact number of civilians killed by drones is unknown because the program operates in secret. We turn now to an unlikely voice challenging the drone warfare program. Former U.S. Army Reserve chaplain Chris Antal, who recently resigned his post in protest. In April, Reverend Antal wrote a letter to President Obama detailing his reasons for leaving the U.S. Army Reserves, citing his opposition to the administration's use of drone strikes, its policy on nuclear proliferation, and what he calls the executive branch's claim of extra-constitutional authority and impunity for international law, unquote. This is not the first time Reverend Antal has voiced his concerns. In 2012, he delivered a sermon in Afghanistan and anonymously posted the text on a Unitarian Universalist website. At the time, he identified himself only as an Army chaplain in Afghanistan. The sermon read in part, quote, "We have sanitized killing and condoned extrajudicial assassinations, war made easy without due process, protecting ourselves from the human cost of war. We have deceived ourselves, denying the colossal misery our wars inflict on the innocent." Reverend Antal's superiors discovered the sermon, and he was reprimanded, nearly losing his job. Then, mid-April, he decided to voluntarily resign over his continued concerns about drone warfare. In doing so, Reverend Antal forfeits benefits that otherwise would have accrued to him through his 8 years of service in the U.S. Army Reserve. Reverend Chris Antal joins us now in our New York studio. He is a minister for the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Rock Tavern, New York, and a founder of the Hudson Valley, New York chapter of Veterans for Peace. Reverend Chris Antal, welcome to Democracy Now!
Amy, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
You're still in the Army, is that right?
I'm on my way out, but the paperwork hasn't been completed yet.
But you have resigned.
I've submitted my resignation, but the Army is a big bureaucracy, and it takes time to get all the signatures.
So really, you're still a U.S. Army chaplain?
I am. I can't speak from that capacity on this program, but on paper, yes.
So talk about your decision. How long did you serve as an Army chaplain, and where did you serve?
Sure. I served for 5 years, 8 years in the reserve, 5 years as a chaplain, and most of that time was as a reserve chaplain. I did spend about 2 years on active duty, and altogether about 6 months in Afghanistan.
And talk about your decision to leave.
Sure. Well, before I can talk about my decision to leave, I need to say why I got in the first place. As a minister, I was driven by compassion to care for the wounded, and as a citizen, driven by a sense of civic duty to carry my fair share in our nation's wars. I think I did both of those things during my time in service, but eventually began to feel a role conflict between my role as a military officer and my role as an ordained minister. And I couldn't reconcile that role conflict, so I decided to resign.
Talk about the speech I just quoted from. Where did you give that speech?
Sure. Well, it was a sermon, and it was never anonymous. As you said, when I posted it, I identified myself. I gave that sermon on Veterans Day, which was on a Sunday in 2012 at Kandahar Airfield to a community gathered for worship in my tradition, a Unitarian Universalist service. And that was about 6 weeks into my deployment when I had witnessed drones. I had learned about practices that violate my sense of what is right. And I decided it was my prerogative as a religious leader to address that in the context of a religious service, a forum of lamentation, a confession, and that is what I did in my sermon. And because I think the issues I raise are of concern for a larger audience, for the whole nation, I made that available through a church website that is sponsored by my denomination.
And talk about what happened then. How was it discovered, and what was the response by the military?
Well, 2 days after it appeared online, I was contacted by an Army lawyer who had read the post. He forwarded it to my commander. I was summoned to the commander's office. He told me that my message doesn't support the mission. He told me that I make us look like the bad guys. He asked me to take it down, which I did. And immediately, nevertheless, I was subjected to an investigation. It's called an Article 15-6 investigation. I had to get a trial defense lawyer in Afghanistan that was provided to me by the Army. And that process drew out for about 2 months. And it ended with what's called a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand. I was handed an official reprimand that said I had made politically inflammatory statements, and I was on that basis released from active duty in Afghanistan, sent home with a do not promote evaluation, which is really a career killer in the military.
You quit in a very public way with a letter to President Obama, your letter of resignation. And in it, you said, "I resign because I refuse to serve as an empire chaplain." Explain.
Well, sure. For me, democracy is about checks and balances. Democracy is about due process. These drone wars have blown due process up in smoke. They've blown checks and balances up in smoke. And democracy is also about no establishment and free exercise of religion. We have in our nation an established religion. It's not Christianity. Jeremy Gunn calls it American national religion. It consists of the unholy trinity of governmental theism, military supremacy, and an understanding of capitalism as freedom. And as a religious leader, I feel it's my prerogative to differentiate myself from this state-sanctioned religion and speak from my authentic tradition in a way that resists these national policies. And that's what I've done in offering my resignation and stating quite clearly that I will not serve as an empire chaplain. I will not lend religious legitimacy to this state-sanctioned violence.
Have you received a response from President Obama, since that's who you wrote your resignation letter to?
I have not.
You also have become a shareholder of Honeywell?
I am a shareholder of Honeywell, yes.
Is this how you plan to support yourself now?
Well, I've never been a shareholder before of anything, and I only own one share. And the reason why I became a shareholder is because I was frustrated with the lack of progress through legislative advocacy. And I believe what we are facing in our country is not just a military-industrial complex that Eisenhower wrote about. It's a military-industrial congressional complex, and we cannot do legislative advocacy without doing shareholder advocacy and confronting some of the corporations that are profiting and that are lobbying our elected officials in order to influence the militarization of U.S. foreign policy.
Can you talk about attending the Honeywell shareholders meeting and what you did?
Sure. I've been to 2 shareholder meetings now. The first one in 2015, where I addressed the CEO, David Cody, on their profiting from armed drones proliferation. This year, I went, as I did last year, with my fellow veteran, Nick Moturn, and he addressed the drone profiting, and I chose to address Honeywell's profiting from nuclear weapons. So I asked Mr. Cody how much Honeywell is profiting from the administration's investment of trillions of dollars in the modernization of our nuclear arsenal. I asked him how much Honeywell is profiting from the administration's decision to launch a new airdropped nuclear cruise missile. And I asked Mr. Cody if he'd ever been to Hiroshima, because I've been there twice, and whether he had faced the horror that this technology produces.
Your wife of 18 years is Japanese?
Yes, I've been married 18 years, and we have 5 children.
And what was your response to President Obama just last week going to Hiroshima?
Well, I was glad and proud of our president for visiting Hiroshima. However, I am disappointed that although he talks the talk of nuclear abolition, the actions of his administration are not consistent with what he's saying. I agree that Hiroshima calls for a moral revolution, a revolution of consciousness and an awakening of America. And I hope, and I remain hopeful, that the administration will cancel plans for the new airdrop nuclear cruise missile and take the 1,000 nuclear warheads off launch on warning status.
Reverend Chris Antal, can you talk about how those you've ministered to have responded to your resignation? Who did you serve in Afghanistan?
Well, I served as an Army chaplain. And as an Army chaplain, I'm responsible for the soldiers in my assigned unit, but also soldiers in my area of operations, as well as contractors and service members from all branches. And I served all of those people during my deployment to Afghanistan. I can say that when I preached the sermon that led to my reprimand, I had the full support of the community of faith that attended that service. When I appealed the letter of reprimand, I appealed with more than 30 letters of support from everyone in that congregation, as well as concerned clergy, chaplains, and citizens across America. So I have had a lot of support.
I wanted to get your response to this presidential election. I want to turn to Democratic presidential candidate, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. In 2014, The Guardian columnist Owen Jones questioned her about the use of drone warfare.
You're a loving parent. What would you say to the loving parents of up to 202 children who have been killed by drones in Pakistan in a program which you escalated as Secretary of State?
Well, I would argue with the premise because clearly the efforts that were made by the United States in cooperation with our allies in Afghanistan and certainly with the Afghan government to prevent the threat that was in Pakistan from crossing the border, killing Afghans, killing Americans, Brits, and others, was aimed at targets that had been identified and were considered to be threats. The numbers about potential civilian casualties, I take with a somewhat big grain of salt because there has been other studies which have proven there not to have been the number of civilian casualties.
And last October on NBC's Meet the Press, Chuck Todd asked Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders about his position on drones.
What does counterterrorism look like in a Sanders administration? Drones, special forces, or what does it look like?
Well, all of that and more.
You're okay with the drone?
Look,
using
drone is a weapon. When it works badly, it is terrible and it is counterproductive. When you blow up a facility or a building which kills women and children, you know what? It not only doesn't do us, it's terrible.
But you're comfortable with the idea of using drones if you think you've isolated an important terrorist?
Yes.
So that continues.
Yes. And look, we all know, you know, that there are people as of this moment plotting against the United States. We have got to be vigorous in protecting our country, no question about that.
That's Senator Bernie Sanders, and before that, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, what they're not saying is the numbers, and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism released just 2 days ago that there have been 7,142 people killed with U.S. drone strikes, most of those in Pakistan. Now, my question is, where is the necessity? Where is the imminent threat to my family, to our families here in the United States, when we kill people halfway around the world with a drone strike?
Reverend Chris Antal, I was wondering if we could end with you reading your resignation letter to President Obama in your own words.
I'd be glad to do that. Dear Mr. President, I hereby resign my commission as an officer in the United States Army. I resign because I refuse to support U.S. armed drone policy. The executive branch continues to claim the right to kill anyone, anywhere on earth, at any time, for secret reasons, based on secret evidence in a secret process undertaken by unidentified officials. I refuse to support this policy of unaccountable killing. I resign because I refuse to support U.S. nuclear weapons policy. The executive branch continues to invest billions of dollars into nuclear weapons, which threaten the existence of humankind and the Earth. I refuse to support this policy of terror and mutually assured destruction. I resign because I refuse to support U.S. policy of preventive war, permanent military supremacy, and global power projection. The executive branch continues to claim extra constitutional authority and impunity from international law. I refuse to support this policy of imperial overstretch. I resign because I refuse to serve as an empire chaplain. I cannot reconcile these policies with either my sworn duty to protect and defend America and our constitutional democracy, or my covenantal commitment to the core principles of my religious faith. These principles include justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, a free and responsible search for truth, a commitment to the democratic process, and the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Respectfully submitted, Christopher John Antal.
Reverend Chris Antal, minister for the Unitarian Universalist congregation now at Rock Tavern, New York, founder of the Hudson Valley, New York chapter of Veterans for Peace. He has served as a U.S. Army chaplain in Afghanistan before publicly resigning over the Obama administration's drone warfare program. He wrote that letter to President Obama in April. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we hear more about the story of Kalief Browder. Kalief, a 16-year-old arrested in New York, falsely accused of taking someone's backpack. He spent 3 years at Rikers Island without trial. Ultimately, he was released. He would commit suicide a few years later. Today, we bring you part 2 of the story of the life and death of Kalief Browder. Then the former president of the Maldives, known around the world as a voice dealing with climate change. Now freed from the Maldives, he's gotten political asylum in Britain. He'll speak to us from London. Stay with us.
Drowned by me. Blow me from the mountains and into the sea. Blow me from the side of the mountain. Blow my head off. Explode my crystal guts. Lay my purple on the grass. I have a glint in my eye. I wanna die. I wanna die. I wanna be the apple of your eye. So drone bomb me, blow me from the mountains and into the sea. Blow me from the side of the mountain, blow my head off, explode my crystal